Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. Today I spoke with Theresa and a subject close to my heart. We were talking all things autism, and make sure you check out to the end where you can find all of her resources that she makes available for everyone. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. I forgot my name there for a second. I don't know why. I've said it at least. I'm 51 years old. I've said it at least 100,000 times, and for a split second, I actually forgot what my surname was. So yeah, I'm David Watson. Would you like to say hello yourself?
I'm Theresa Lions.
Anything you've forgotten today that you're not supposed to forget?
Well, I was kind of having a rough day, but I've pretty much forgotten it because you're having a great day, and now I'm laughing. So fantastic!
That's it. Job achieved. We can stop right there and quit while we're ahead.
Totally.
And so thank you for coming on. I do appreciate it. And we have something in common. We both have connections to autism.
Yes.
And as I was explaining to you, my nephew Mason, he has autism, and he lives with his mum, and I don't really know what to add after that, because I've always found there's a bit of a misconception, in my own opinion anyway, a misconception around autism, that it's a standard sort of covers everything. If you say autism, they're all the same, and I've always found that you can put 1,000 autistic people in a room, and there's 1,000 different people, and the only thing that they kind of will all have in common is their own means to communicate. That's about that's the only connection I can make. And typically they all breathe, eat, that they kind of, if I was going to say another similarity, they all understand their own space, and they all like to be in their own space. Doesn't mean you're not welcome, but you just kind of has its own rules.
Yeah. There's some people with autism have problems with getting too close to people.
That's
what I said.
They all have their own rules.
Definitely. Personal space. I think there certainly is a variety of rules, but you have to know what their rules are. Yes. And that's the complexity of autism. So even when people are just thinking about that word, they might know 2 or 3 people, and it's so different. And the way you interact with one is different than the way you interact with another. And that's where it gets so confusing. And sometimes people who are on the periphery, they get like a little hesitant, and it almost looks standoffish. Yeah. But it's really, what I found is really, they just don't know what to do. What should I do? I don't want to do anything that upsets this person. So then there's kind of like this hesitancy. So autism definitely has a lot of complexity.
As I was saying, when I used to work in a day centre, and even with my nephew Mason, autism's the one I've always found the most difficult, and it's because. And this is what I realised, and it's a reflection about myself, is I need a particular feedback loop, and typically people with autism can't give it to me. And because of the complexity and because of how different it always is, they have feedback loops, but I don't. Then they're not something that I'm naturally attuned to. Whereas when I used to work with people with learning disabilities or Down syndrome, there's almost a kind of boisterousness and a playfulness where at times I could probably be accused of being inappropriate, because you'd be rough play, you'd be making fun of each other, but it was very external and very loud, and it's very interactive. And you can read the body language, you can read all the signs, you can have that two-way conversation. And like I said, even with Mason's an excellent communicator when he wants to talk to you about something. And when I watch my sister, his mum, talk to him, he's fine. But with me, it's always yes, no answers. And it's not him, it's because I don't understand how he communicates, even after 19 years. It's just not my forte.
Well, sometimes it has to do with pressure. So many people with autism have either apraxia or dyspraxia, which means there's motor planning difficulties. So even if in their mind they're able to, in this instance, your nephew, he might be able to and want to say much longer responses, he might start to feel nervous, right? Because he wants to have a good interaction with you, and he could feel your energy of, okay, I want to talk to Mason, but maybe sometimes I don't know what I'm doing or what I'm saying. And there's kind of like this little anxiety and stuff. And the pressure might make him just reduce what he wants to say to something very simple like yes or no, just because of the whole motor planning issue. So that's definitely something, I mean, you might even be able to ask him, right? Because it sounds like you want to have a closer connection, but it's always like, how do I do that? You know?
I think what it is his mum is better at probably more to do with routines, because their conversations will be when he comes back from college and stuff like that. Whereas when I see him, I'll start bombarding him with questions. How's your day? What have you been up to? And of course, he'll always try and keep them at closed answers. Whereas, you know, and often that's because he'll be, as I was saying, he has rules about his space. And of course, sometimes I'm breaking those rules because I'm trying to have a conversation with him rather than waiting, and because when he wants to talk about what he's doing, well, you can be there for 45 minutes before he stops talking.
Gotcha.
But as soon as you try to change it to a topic that you want to talk to, well, that's not why he's talking to you.
You know? Gotcha.
And like I said, that's why I say I think it's more of a reflection on me, because they're not the feedback loops that I bounce off well with. You know.
So feedback loops, so like you're talking about joking around and playing, especially when it's with interacting with someone who has severe or profound autism where speech is not there, right? So what I've learned over the years is that many kids and young adults with autism who are non-speaking try to be funny, and many times we miss the joke. So there is feedback, but sometimes it's really hard to know that was like purposeful feedback. So like, I'm trying to think of all the different things that I've heard. A kid would go and jump in the shower, not turn the shower on, but all of a sudden out of nowhere, just get up and go into the tub. And so once this young man was able to have communication, his parents asked him, why are you doing that? And he said, I'm just trying to make you laugh. Yeah. But the parents thought like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong. Does he want to shower? Like, so you're trying to figure out, what does this behavior mean? And sometimes it is just to be funny. Yeah. So there's something in ABA analysis, which is applied behavioral analysis. That's kind of the gold standard, the old gold standard for autism and treatments and things like that. In that, and there's a lot of controversy and complexity just with that, but in that there's a technique called ABC, so antecedent behavior consequence. And this is what many parents do. And in schools, a lot of times this is done usually when kids are starting to get in trouble, right? Like, why are they doing a certain thing? It's really trying to understand what their behavior is trying to say. Now, behavior isn't always communication, right? We can't just say, okay, whenever that kid jumps into the shower is because he wants to make a joke. Sometimes he might be like, especially if it's like later towards the night, if there's a particular pattern, then it might be like, no, I want to shower and I have no other way to tell you. So it's that context. And so the antecedent is always important, because maybe when that kid was jumping into the shower, it was earlier in the day, middle of the day. Maybe they were watching TV and it was something funny, or maybe it was something serious, right? And so when you take that data and the antecedent, we were watching TV, all of a sudden the behavior is he jumped up and went into the shower. Okay, what's the consequence, right? So like maybe the parents started saying, do you need this? Do you need that? And they stopped the movie, and maybe he got into a bad mood, right? So it's like, wait a second, he got up, jumped into the shower, and then he got upset. Okay, when you understand from his point of view, he was doing that to be funny, right? And nobody laughed and people started getting upset. Now he's like, this is exactly the opposite of what I wanted to do, right? So now his behavior becomes annoyed and frustrated because it's so hard to communicate, even just like, I want to be funny. So when parents are trying to figure out different behaviors and what does the behavior mean, tracking the behaviors like that, antecedent, behavior, consequence, for multiple instances, not just one, that's really what helps give insight into what does this behavior really mean when you take into context.
How did you start working with autism?
My daughter. So I had no plans, no, there was nothing in my career that was going towards autism. So I have a PhD in computational chemistry from Yale. My PhD thesis was on structure-based drug design. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry on drug design, and then I switched over and was a medical strategist for a consulting company for a variety of different pharmaceutical companies. So that was really understanding how they generate revenue, how do they place their product, which is a drug, and how do they increase, percentage share and all of things like that. And then my daughter was diagnosed with autism, and I asked the specialist, okay, now what? And they were just like, well, there's not really too much you can do. Things usually get worse. They don't get better. There's ABA, so there's behavioral approaches, but there's really nothing to do. And now an autism diagnosis based all on observation. So there's no lab tests, there's no blood tests, there's no MRI, there's no stool, there's no lab paper that gives you a quantitative, okay, this is the number, this means severe autism, this means, so it really was from a lack of a plan, especially having been a medical strategist. I'm used to having, okay, what are the guidelines? What are the cutting edge? I worked in oncology. Those guidelines are constantly evolving and changing. You have to stay up to date on all the research that's coming out. And what I was finding with autism was just like, yeah, we don't really know what's going on. Your daughter has this diagnosis because we can see there's a problem, but we don't know what the problem really is. And that was very unsatisfying. And that's really where I started to turn all my attention towards.
When you say unsatisfying, where did it drive you?
It drove me to PubMed.
Well, apart from despair,
well, so emotion. So there's two sides of me. So we have like the mom side, the parent side, and then we have the Dr. Lions side, which is very analytical. And when someone gives me an answer, like, there's not really much you can do, I know that's nonsense. And I'm like, I'm not, even though this was an amazing person studying autism, it's not lack of their skills. It was really more just a lack of having a good answer with a plan that had been in many ways universally accepted by the medical field. So different doctors have different opinions, and most doctors are like, yeah, there's something going on within that child's body, but there hasn't been a consensus. And why has there not been a consensus? Just like what we talked about in the beginning. Autism is so varied. So it would take an immense amount of time and dedication and understanding to maybe break it down into subgroups, which some scientists and doctors have tried to do, but it really breaks apart. The other problem is there's no drug for autism, right? Which kind of makes sense, right? Because everyone's saying we don't really know exactly what it is, right? So how can you make a drug if you don't have a molecular target? You don't have a protein, you don't have like a gene, you have no molecular target. So when you have no pharmaceutical company, believe it or not, that's what drives innovation in many therapeutic areas, because then they can make a profit. So now like those research engines are fired up, and then there's an education piece. So how do doctors learn? This is what my job was as a medical strategist. How do doctors learn what medicines to give? They go to conferences, they do continuing medical education, right? So all of that is not there for autism. So there is a lot of data in PubMed, in scientific research articles, in journals, but the average person can't access that. Usually you have to pay $50 an article just to read it. And then obviously reading it is not the most fun thing, right? Because you're reading scientific literature. So that's all the complexities of how do you even get good information. So, after the diagnosis, I was upset. I was angry. I was crying. I was, everything about my life now was going to entirely change what I thought my daughter could do. And I don't know about that, right? Like, so all of the things that we planned and just everything was entirely different.
Where did it? So we have your daughter. We have the diagnosis, and where did it start that you became such an advocate for autism? Because it's an evolution, isn't it? Because you're learning about your daughter, and then that's now evolved to helping the rest of the world.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And it's a really steep bell curve.
It is. It definitely is. So I would say where the kind of advocacy began, that seed was, there's nothing you can really do. To me, I'm like, as Dr. Lions, I'm like, that's ridiculous. And even Mama Bear is like, oh no, like, no, right? So I turn to the science and I start learning. And one of the publications that I read was a publication that said 10% of kids with an autism diagnosis lose their diagnosis and have an optimal outcome. And now that was like, okay. And so I looked at some of the other articles that article was referencing, and I saw over the decades, there are, a publication here and there that would show autism was not lifelong. So that got me very interested, right? So now I started doing a deep dive. I start talking to the researchers. I start reaching out to other parents whose kids are, much older, or even kids. I had someone who worked for me, and when I said how my daughter was diagnosed with autism, he replied, "Oh yeah, my son had autism too. My wife did, and he listed all these different things. He's like, he's fine now. You wouldn't even have known that we went through all of that." So I started collecting stories and data from parents who were in that percentage, right? Which became very real to me then. So it was just that combination of, okay, this is what the science says, and now I'm talking to other people, and this is legit, right? So then now that's when I go all in.
So the first thing that seems to have caught your attention, that there's more to this, is the fact that around 10% lose their diagnosis.
Yeah, that was the first, I would say, scientific aspect that I could really like sink my teeth in and be like, all right, that 10%, yes, it sounds small, but that is pretty significant, right? So for me, that was a turning point where I was like, I need to understand that, because I just can't let my daughter not do anything for her and let her go. I knew that trajectory, like she had no future. Right. So it's like, all right, I have a 10% chance. Let me really understand that. And as I learned more and more, that's when the advocacy grew. That's when, so believe it or not, it wasn't my idea to really start any of this. It was one of my daughter's specialists, who saw the change in my daughter, which I didn't think the change was even significant. I'm like, we have so much further to go. But this doctor was so incredibly encouraged. They were the ones who said, you need to start a company. You need to start educating other parents. And usually people are pitching me on like business ideas and all this stuff. And they were like, no, I'm actually doing the opposite. I am telling you to create something and then come back and pitch me, because I know how well you know your science, and this needs to be educated more and more. So it started out with just helping my daughter, and then it just grew organically from that.
So where is it now?
Where is Navigating Autism?
Yeah. Because this the thing is, you've moved from being told your daughter has a diagnosis, and by the way, nothing's going to get done. So good luck with that. So like you say, so that kind of, on one hand, there's the doctor side of you like, no, that's shit. There's got to be something. And then there's the mama side of you who's like, no, that's shit. I'm not taking that.
Yeah.
Right. So that kind of riles and inspires at the same time. And enough that you start, like you say, you start doing research, you start discovering things, and that starts laying foundations. Even if it's not noticed, the foundations are laid. And then the consultant doctor is like, actually, you're kind of, in a weird way, sort of saying, you're doing a better job than us, then maybe you can help other people. so then there's that evolution, isn't it? The seed is planted, the tree is growing. You just didn't actually realise, and it's sort of like,
very true.
And so there's that point when you realise you can do something more. But I don't imagine at any point you thought where you are today was what you were thinking was going to happen.
No. I would say, so it's been like one step at a time, but I certainly would say there came a point where I'm a scientist. I wasn't on Facebook. I wasn't on YouTube. I wasn't in social media and stuff because that really wasn't, I don't know, it didn't bring me joy. That wasn't what I was even doing, in my personal life. And it really came to the point of, okay, if I want to help parents, then that's what I need to do. I need to get out there and really start educating. And most of me did not want to. So it took some reflection. I've always been a meditator and all of that. And so it took self-reflection of, all right, my daughter is getting better because I have quality information. Now, it's not a secret. People can learn the same information that I did. But would I have wanted someone who was me to have put that information out there so when my daughter was diagnosed, I didn't spend all that time and energy trying to find it? And the answer was, yeah. I wish there was someone out there who was explaining the science to me, who was really driving just credibility to a lot of things that other parents were saying, right? Other parents were experiencing this. We had that 10%, right? So it's like, that 10% needs to really be understood and then communicated out, because it takes so long for something to go from discovery to mainstream practice. It takes 20 to 30 years on average in the pharmaceutical industry. And I don't want to wait that long for my daughter. My daughter would be like 35, right? I still would not be doing anything if I was just waiting for external things to change. And so it really became like a duty. Felt like a Dharma, where it's like, I have this information, I can explain it, and the only thing that's holding me back is my ego of not really wanting to be out there and to be playing a role like this. So once I realized that, I'm like, well, that's not a good answer. so start making videos. So, I mean, my early videos are terrible. I've had a YouTube channel for 10 years now, and people can. I've kept all of those old videos. And it's like rough, and there is that evolution, but I felt like it was needed. And that was part of what my duty was, because I could explain it. I could get the quality information. And I really think it's important for parents to have this.
No, I agree. And like you, I've never removed old videos because I want people, because people judge the product by what they see today, not the guy that started 6 years ago who didn't even know how to record a podcast properly. And there's a podcast episode that never made it because I didn't realize that I wasn't recording the other guy's sound. So we'd had this whole conversation like you and I are, and I didn't know to do sound checks like I did with you at the beginning to make sure everything was recording properly. And so him and I had this great conversation, and except the only person that heard him was me. And so you've got to leave those up there. I think it's important because it shows, one, it kind of shows yourself if you're having a bad day, actually how far you've come, and the other one is somebody who might. I sometimes people can look at what looks like somebody who's really accomplished and like, well, I'll never do that. And it's just like, well, look at how I started, and you're probably already better than that. So
yeah,
the rest
is very true, and that's very true with autism as well. So it's not something that changes overnight. We're not talking about 7 days. Oh, I just did, I gave her some vitamin C and boom, all of a sudden everything's fine. Like that's not how it goes. So you do have to have that mindset, that determination, that inquisitive mindset, being curious, not getting upset when things don't work out the way you want, or you think, oh yes, I know exactly what it is, and you do some type of lab test. The lab test comes back and it's like, no, that's not it. Okay, now what? Now where do I go? So yeah, it definitely, autism takes a lot of determination for sure.
So when parents come to you, how do you start the advice?
So we've developed something called the Navigating Autism Matrix. I've worked with parents now in 22 different countries. So I have a lot of experience. And what I've learned is that not every parent wants to just start the same way, right? So autism is so complex that there are many different categories a parent really has to keep track of. Right. So we have diet, super important. Healthcare team, right? You need the right doctors, you need the right lab tests, you need to understand those things. You have supplements and prescriptions, what really makes sense relating to what the lab test results were. You have mindset for the parent, mostly. You have probiotics, you have education, another aspect, and you have celebrating success, right? Because you got to feed the engine to keep going. And those are all aspects that parents really have to be diligent about and track things and change things. So the Navigating Autism Matrix is a circle. And we say to the parent, where do you want to start? Yeah. Right. So when I was a parent in the beginning, it was like, I do not want to deal with diet. Like, I have so much going on already. And now you want me to cook differently. You want me to shop differently. Like, I just couldn't handle that. Right. So, and also it wasn't 100% my expertise. Where I felt comfortable is, all right, let's start getting doctors, or let's start ordering a lab test, giving chemistry. Right. I know chemistry. I'm very comfortable with chemistry. So you really want to have the parent take action where they think they're going to be successful. So they have that choice of, okay, where do you want to start? And because there's no wrong answer, right? Like, you take progress in any of those categories, that parent's going to be like, oh, okay, what else can I do, right? So if you tell the parent you have to start with diet, or you have to start with something, and they just don't feel that, they're not going to get very far. And so we have the Navigating Autism Matrix, which allows the parent to choose, okay, where you want to start. We've got to do it all eventually, right? But things will change as you get momentum. So we have that, and we have board certified health coaches that help parents maintain that mindset and that determination all throughout, because this is a complex issue. You're going to have to build a healthcare team, right? And many parents haven't done that before. How do we do that? How do we find a good doctor? All of these questions that come up. So our health coaches are really helpful in the sense of keeping that motivation. And then with the platform, parents are able to order functional medicine tests and get those results. And we teach them what those results mean. So then they can really pick a better doctor, because autism is so complex, right? Not every doctor is good in certain aspects. So you really want to understand, okay, for my child, what is the most important thing? All right, I got that. I understand that. And now how do I find people who can help me address that? And then things resolve, things get better, things change, cycle repeats.
So when you talk about blood tests, what is it you're looking for?
Well, there's a variety of different tests, right? So the functional medicine tests are looking at more like the root cause. So what are the issues? So we have functional medicine or integrative medicine, which is really trying to understand why. Why is this child having this as a symptom? Whereas conventional medicine, a lot of times is like, okay, there's some problem, here's a drug, here's a script that will resolve that. But it doesn't really address the reason why it was there in the first place. So if you stop whatever that medication is, a lot of times things come back, right? So having both of those aspects of medicine is important. It's a team approach. So to answer your question about blood work, so for blood work, with conventional medicine, you could do something like vitamin D, right? We're both in climates where vitamin D is vitally important, right? And many times, even simple aspects like this relating to health are just ignored because the child has autism, right? So if they're like, oh, my child seems a little more sad, a little more moody, my child's having trouble falling asleep, what are most doctors going to say? That's just autism. That's just the way life is, right? And it's not true, right? So you can start with a conventional medicine doctor and say, all right, let's look at vitamin D. So vitamin D, we all know when the levels are low, we might be a little bit more on the moody side, right? We might have trouble falling asleep. Vitamin D is related to melatonin production. Melatonin, really important for sleep, right? So sometimes resolving sleep issues is something so simple as optimal vitamin D status. So you can get that done with conventional medicine. Whereas functional medicine might be like, all right, let's try and understand gut infections a bit more. So gut health is hugely important. And what are the factors in the gut that might not be optimal, that might be contributing to some issues that that child might be having? So those are the different ways to use medicine and to really understand what are the root causes. There's nothing wrong with a temporary fix, right? Like, so if child's having trouble with sleeping, melatonin is great, for like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, until you resolve what the problem is, right? So it's that Band-Aid approach. And that's why you want to use both perspectives of medicine.
So the blood tests is vitamin D a significant factor that's missing when it comes to autism?
Definitely. It's missing also for most of the population, but for autism, yes. So with autism, you want the child to have optimal health, right? But doctors don't really look at that when they make the diagnosis of autism. They're not looking on the molecular level. So they're not looking for, B12 status, right? So maybe this child's a picky eater, so they're not getting enough B vitamins. And what does that impact? That impacts the brain, development of the brain. If they're not eating enough, the brain is obviously not getting enough. It also impacts detoxification abilities, right? It also impacts mitochondria. Mitochondria love B vitamins, right? That's what they need. And we need mitochondria for optimal health. We need it for energy. We need it for focus. We need it for muscle coordination. So there's so much. So that's what functional medicine does, is really start to look at what these issues are that might be contributing to someone not having that optimal health.
And when you say diet, what foods should people be using? Because you mentioned when you said it was like, well, now I have to change how I shop, I have to change how I cook.
Yeah. So I was specifically referencing to gluten-free. So going gluten-free, and especially going gluten-free over a decade ago was not the easiest of things. Nowadays, you have like aisles of gluten-free options. That was not the case 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was really more, okay, you just need to change your cooking and have more meat and vegetables. So there are 8 different diets that address a variety of different symptoms that kids with autism commonly have. So again, that's why autism is so complex. It's not just one diet. Gluten-free really makes an impact for the majority of kids, but I can't say it's absolutely 100% have to do for everybody with autism. It really varies. Most of the kids benefit from it. I'll say the kids that benefit greatly from it are the ones where sensory issues are a lot of times a problem, because of the mechanism of action of gluten. You eat gluten, there's a few different processes that goes on, and basically it tells your body to open sesame, right? So your gut it's dynamic, it lets things out, but it's very specific. And so when you eat gluten, what happens is you get more permeable. So you have things going out of your gut that shouldn't, right? So now you're starting to have systemic inflammation. Your immune system has to kick on. And if you don't have a lot of vitamin D, your immune system is, it's got not as much fuel as you need, right? And so then these different molecules that got out can now actually go to the central nervous system, to our brain, our spine, and it's the same mechanism, open sesame, right? So now your central nervous system, including your brain, is more permeable, right? So then now other things can go where they really shouldn't. So for some kids with autism, it makes a huge impact. There are some kids where they go gluten-free and so many things are resolved. Whereas other parents go gluten-free and they might see like 1 or 2 change, but there's still other issues. And the reason is you've got to understand the chemistry.
Yeah. Do we know what causes autism? Or is there?
It varies.
I was about to say, is that
varies.
even the right question?
Well, so there's no scientific publication out there on a cause of autism. There's a lot of correlation. So what there is there's increased risk. So like air pollution actually poses an increased risk for a woman who's pregnant, but also for a young developing child. So you have risks, but you also have risks at different times. So for the 3rd trimester, if a woman is exposed to a certain level of air pollution, the risk for autism increases by about 30%. However, if that child in early development years, so 2 years and under, if that child is exposed to that same level of air pollution, then their risk of autism is now 60%. So there's all of this data as to, okay, these are risks, increased risks, but there's nothing that says, okay, 100%, this is what explains all of autism. And I doubt there will be a publication that can say, this is what explains 100% of autism. This is the cause of autism, just because it is so varied.
So how would you how would you describe autism as a diagnosis? Is it sensory? Is it brain function? Is it communication?
So, I mean, the criteria of an autism diagnosis, it's 100% observational. So you have deficits in communication. And so what that looks like is very different. So you can have reduced back and forth conversation like you have with your nephew, right? You could have poor eye contact, right? So the person is just not really tuning in socially to the conversation. And then also there's difficulty in understanding like social context, right? So those are the ways that deficits in communication show up in autism. Now, there can be different reasons for that. So you can explain autism very easily in many ways on what you see, but it's hard then to explain on a molecular level why it's there. So there's something called cerebral folate deficiency, and that has been a huge hot topic here in the States pretty much since the fall. And what has been learned over more than 20 years is that there are antibodies in 70% of kids with autism that prevent folate from being utilized. And so what that means is there's difficulty in speech. Yep. So all the things I just talked about, what we see, some of it, maybe 70%, although it's hard to put a percentage on it, but some of it could be due to folate deficiency in the brain. So it's really hard to explain on a molecular level, to give a whole generality of what autism is on the molecular level. But there are all these instances of how you can explain observable behavior, but from the molecular level.
Because I think that's sometimes what's been difficult for autism, isn't it? It's not a... I'm trying to think how... It's not a clinical diagnosis as such, and like, here's a blood test. Oh, look, you have autism. It's, well, I can see symptoms, and people then try and explain, and then because of the complexity, and probably one of the most underestimated parts of the diagnosis is each child with autism, because autism kind of, again, I might be wording this really clumsy, but as the child develops, so does the autism. And it kind of grows with the child and the child's personality. And that makes it difficult for observations, because you might be observing autism, but you're observing it through the lens of their personality. So if it's, some children could naturally be extroverts, could be introverts, just like you and I. But if they've got autism as well, it, in a sense, can stifle the personality that's naturally there, in the sense that you and I wouldn't observe it.
Yeah, it certainly could. It's a controversial topic and this is definitely...
But that's why I was saying it's quite clumsy trying to talk about it.
Well, there are people who say autism is really more of an identity than a diagnosis.
Yeah, okay.
And so this is where, well, and then you'll have other people who say, no, this is definitely a diagnosis, right? So especially on the profound autism side, maybe someone might be banging their head in the wall. And, when that parent hears, oh, it's more of a personality. And then you look at this side of the autism, no one is going to say that is a personality of that person. So it gets complex in the sense of there's also masking. So this is another topic that's very controversial in autism. And for females, especially with autism, masking rates are higher. And what masking is, and many women do this, right? You kind of just socially look around and be, okay, what is the expectation? Okay, I will just do what I see being done. And so masking is something that can happen often. And many times when someone is diagnosed with autism later in life, so in their 20s or later, that's when they really start to understand, okay, I've actually been masking to cover up, my social interactions. So there's a lot of complexity to autism. And that's why the diagnosis is so hard. And it's also, as a parent, so hard because there is none of that lab work. It's just an observation, and it certainly, it's very empty in that sense.
It is, because as I said, I've worked with severely autistic people. One person steps out immediately because, again, we couldn't tell you why, but every now and again he'd just start punching himself in the face. And I mean, and you could only try and stop. He, in my experience, he was never externally violent towards me or anybody else. But for whatever reason, he would start hitting himself. And it was always in the face. And when I say, it's extremely, the first time you see it, it's extremely distressing, because he's doing it with all the force he has.
Yeah.
But you don't know what's triggered it, because he was non-verbal, apart from kind of squeaks. He was non-verbal, and there was no way to communicate what was happening, and it's very complex emotionally to watch, because everything about your brain is telling you, well, he can't, that's not helpful, it's harmful, and he can't be enjoying it. But there's no way for him to communicate why he's doing it. And there's no way for you to communicate him, that this must be hurting, but then it can't be hurting because he's continuing to do it. And it's, but and then it's so off the scale when you see it for the first time. That it's just
very traumatic.
Yeah, it is really, really traumatic. And partly because you're so helpless.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what many parents feel, regardless of where their child is on the spectrum. There are certain behaviors that happen. And when someone is non-speaking like that, it's hard to understand, why are they doing this? And so there's a new, there's a newly accepted, although still controversial. I think you're getting the hint. Everything about autism has controversy to it. There is a new communication way, new-ish way of teaching people with profound autism like that to spell on a letterboard, and they use gross motor skills. So moving the arm, because again, apraxia, dyspraxia, it's so hard to muscle. And so I've interviewed different people, and on social media now more and more there are kids posting their own videos of them spelling on letterboards, and sometimes kids are saying some of that really drastic behavior has to do because something might have been hurting, and the pain was so intense they were just trying to do anything to just not feel that pain, and there was different pain. So it's heartbreaking for that to be someone's life, right? And that's what doctors are saying when they say things usually get worse, they don't get better, and there's nothing you can do. That was that person's life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like that for everyone with autism. And it's definitely hard for that person and their family and anyone taking care of them.
It is. And where would you say the best way for people to find you and resources that you have available for them?
Sure. So any parent who's interested in working with us on the Navigating Autism platform, they can come check us out at navigatingautism.com. I do spell autism differently. I spell it AWETISM. So definitely.
And that's a great play on words. That is a fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
And where can they find your YouTube channel?
YouTube, if you just search my name, Theresa Lions, I come up. There's over 10 years of videos. So you pretty much will come across me if you start searching anything relating to autism.
Cool. And my last question, which is just random for my own entertainment. I want you to imagine you have a time machine. The time machine is a car of your choice.
Okay.
What car would you have? Where would you go? And what would you have playing on the radio?
Okay. What car? A Maserati convertible.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Where would I go? Maybe Egypt. During Egyptian times of building the pyramids. I think that would be really cool to see how they're really built, and just, I think that would be fun. And what song? I'm not very good with music. I love music, but what song?
I'm a bit like that. I love that song. Which song's that?
Yeah.
The one that was playing 2 minutes ago. It's just stopped. It's one of my favourites.
Yeah. Maybe Girls Just Want to Have Fun. There we go.
Cyndi Lauper.
There we go. Yes.
Theresa, that has been fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. I really have appreciated it.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. And that was Theresa. And I have a kind of complex relationship with autism because of my nephew, and I love my nephew to bits, and I'm very fond of him. And in a sense, I wish I could have more of his attention, which is just an uncle being selfish, really. Because, like lots of uncles, they love the boy in front of them. But it's an interesting subject, and as Theresa said, because it's not cynical as such, but because you can't give a prescription for it as in a tablet form, research is slow, and it is a complex issue. But hopefully for people listening to this, you will find resources, other people. There's great networks in forums and stuff and forums and stuff on the internet, and it's not the lost cause or the helpless cause people used to think it was. So if there is any information you want, or if there's anything that's missed from the description, just get in touch. I will pass on any details that I can help with. But as always, wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.